So this is another one of those Jazzy Jeff stories. There was a time where I was doing a ton and ton of work for Jeff, wasn't charging him any money. All he had to do was keep buying gear from me. And for a year or so, because his studio was right next to TechCom, I would walk out at 6:30 at night from TechCom, walk into the studio and work with him until 10 or 11 o'clock at night every day. And what he promised me in return is whenever he got a production deal, he wanted to hire me to be in charge of the production company that he was putting together. And I thought that was great. I'll invest the time, and as long as he's buying gear from me, everything's good. Well, the one day came by, and somehow I found out that the production deal was offered to Jeff, and he turned it down. And that kind of made all the time that I was working for nothing. And then he decided that he was going to move his studio from the warehouse recording studio someplace else, and he was going to start buying from another a vendor, which, just annoyed me because I invested all this time in it. And he still needed me, though. And I told him, okay, if you're going to have me do work, I got to get paid. And it's $50 an hour, and that's that. And he says, all right, I'll pay you. He said, but I'm going to ask you to do things, and you just do them and just keep track of your time. And I said, all right. So I kept track of my time, and I think the time the bill came up, I don't know, it was like $500 or $1,000, something like that. And he had me doing a ton of programming for him for a synth, and he had like a pedal board for changing patches so he could do it live and all. And the time came up for him to pay, and then I told him, I said, okay, you got to pay this bill. And he was rehearsing, or I don't know what he was doing. He was over at Alpha International Recording Studio, which later became the Opera House, but they had a big live room, and he was in there, and I went in there to talk to him, and he says, we were talking back and forth, and he says, okay, yeah, we'll take care of it. And somehow he slips out, he goes out the door, not saying anything, leaves the room, and his manager shows up. And his manager starts at me. He says, what are we talking about here? I go, who are you? And then he tells me I'm Jeff's manager. I go, I never heard of you. And he said, yeah, well, I have to take care of everything. I go, this is between me and Jeff. It has nothing to do with you. So no, Jeff's business is my business. Oh boy, this was making me go crazy. And I said, I just told him, I'm not talking to you about anything. I'll talk to Jeff. And me and Jeff went back and forth and back and forth. He eventually paid me. Things got smoothed over, and everything got back to normal. Him buying gear from me and us working again together. But there was a rocky patch, and I had to charge him. He wanted me to do the work. I can't do anything for nothing. And the whole point of the story is these managers, they kind of weasel their way in between you and the artist, and then you can't... you can't get things done. Oh, it reminds me of the other story. Jeff had hired this guy, Herb Smith. I think it was it Herb Smith? I think that's what his name was. And Jeff told me, this is the guy that approves everything for sale. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, whenever I want to buy something, Herb has to approve it. I said, but it's your money. He said, yeah, but if Herb doesn't approve it, then I don't buy it. I go, well, then, okay. And so anytime Jeff wanted something, I'd have to ask Herb, can he buy it? And Herb would say, yes, he can buy it. So I guess he was putting a governor on himself because he was spending way too much money. And in a certain way, it made sense. In another way, it just seemed like if he just had a little bit more self-control, he could just do it himself and not pay someone another salary just so that they could say yes or no on his finances. So, well, there you go. That's my Jeff story.